Coach Donnie Campbell, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thanks for having me. It's a real honor to be on your podcast. I'm kind of speechless right now. I'm a little bit intimidated, if you will.
Well, how do you think I feel, man? I'm across from a man who's had a tryout for an NFL team, played college sports, taught for 40 years, influenced cable television through your shadow because of your light. So you've had a huge impact on those that know you. Now you're about to have a huge impact on our audience, and they're going to feel like they know you. So for those who are meeting you for the very first time, when you introduce yourself, what do you like to say? So when you say, "Hey, my name's Donnie," what do you generally follow up with?
Well, I tell everyone I'm a teacher and a coach. I've been coaching and teaching for almost 40 years. In fact, this year I'll be starting my 40th year in education, teaching math. I just say, hey, I was a teacher and coach. I love it. I love being in the gym. I love being in the classroom. I never felt like I coached basketball. I felt like I taught attitude. And then that all changed one day when I'm walking down the hallway to my classroom to start my day about 3 or 4 years ago. And a colleague sees me and says, hey, Coach Campbell, do you realize that you're the inspiration behind the show Ted Lasso? And I knew absolutely, John, I knew absolutely nothing about the show. So I hurried up and got into my classroom and did my research and found the show and went home that night. And my wife and I started watching it. And there's millions of people throughout the world. We fell in love with it. It's very endearing. And as we're watching the show that night, my wife points up to the TV screen and says, yeah, Donnie, that's you. Well, John, I'll be honest with you. I didn't see it, but I did see many of the lessons that I taught Jason and his teammates 30 years earlier being applied to a show about a football soccer coach.
So let's come back to Ted Lasso later on. I want to hear first about the background of the coach who inspired that show. So before I'm inspired by Ted and Apple Television and everything else, I want to be inspired by you, man. We're neighbors. I grew up in Missouri. Tell us about what your childhood was like growing up.
Well, it's from a small farming community, Lyons, Kansas, about 3,500 people. My dad was a machinist for 40 years. And a great story about my dad, he came from 14 kids. He was the oldest boy. There were seven girls, seven boys. Really, there were 15. One died at stillbirth, died. He was in Hiroshima the day after it was bombed.
Wow.
So tough guy, but the most loving person you'd ever meet in your life. My mom was a secretary for the government for 40 years as well. And they emphasized to all us kids, my sister who just passed about a year ago, and my older sister, my older brother, he also passed. But we lived in very humble beginnings. There wasn't a lot to do. I didn't want to be a farmer. I didn't want to do that. But my parents really expected us to do well in school, and they felt like for them, I'm sure your parents was, as parents, we want our kids to do better than us. So they emphasized education. And growing up in a small town, we played every sport: baseball in the summer, football in the fall, basketball in the winter. And I had all my buddies right there on the street. We would go down to the nearest tennis courts and play basketball till all hours of the night, till the lights would shut off and they wouldn't let us turn them on anymore. And I had tremendous teachers and coaches that inspired me every day, held me accountable, but I knew someday I wanted to be just like them. I had a tremendous basketball coach that was my math teacher. And then when I went to college, I got highly recruited as a quarterback and went to Kansas State. And things didn't work out as well as I thought. I was a throwing quarterback. I'm 6'6" at that time, about 220 pounds. I could throw the ball probably 80, 85 yards. I didn't always know where to throw it, but I threw it.
Go
um,
deep.
but I had a great experience at Kansas State. I played basketball my freshman year, and Jack Hartman was the coach then. Lonnie Kruger was the assistant,
Wow.
and played 1 year of basketball. And then also my last year of school there was offered to play baseball too. I didn't do that because I signed with the Houston Oilers as a quarterback. And I thought I did really well, but it was the year that they only kept two quarterbacks. So they had Warren Moon. Of course, I wasn't going to be that Warren Moon. And they had Oliver Luck, whose son was, the quarterback that played in Indianapolis. And so I ended up getting cut. Came home and finished my student teaching at Kansas State and started teaching and coaching in Kansas City, and the rest is history. I just love being around sports, love being in the gym, love the smell of a gym. Kids keep me young. I feel young. I don't feel like I'm 63 years old. I feel like I'm just every year, I feel like I'm 24 years old starting another year at school. I love it. I love kids. I love being around kids. And it's because I had so many great teachers and coaches who inspired me to be able to do what I'm doing now. And I love it. Very blessed.
So my children who have done well in sports did well through pure effort. If you're born under the banner of O'Leary, you're in trouble athletically. So in order to make any team afterwards, you've got to earn this thing. And those who have really earned it. And that has taught them a lot. When you came out of high school, highly sought after, highly recruited, came into Kansas State, riding high, man. And then day after day, week after week, quarter after quarter, month after month, year after year, you find yourself near the end of the bench or somewhere down the bench. What did that teach you about focus, about effort, about discipline, about showing up, about true success in life? What were you learning during those years of maybe not accomplishing what you'd hoped to, but maybe ultimately setting yourself up to accomplish more than you thought possible?
Well, first, it's amazing what we learn when we're humbled.
Hmm,
The ears seem to wide open when you have some humility. If it would be now and I was a quarterback at Kansas State, I probably would transfer because of the transfer portal and NIL. I knew I had a vision that I knew I wanted to get a degree. But every day I went out, I admit the first 3 years that I was there, I struggled. I didn't do a very good job handling it. I made excuses. I blamed others. And I was not a very good teammate. I don't know what happened, if it was just maturity or I woke up. I knew I wasn't going to play, but I was going to be a really, really good teammate. And I was going to work hard every day knowing I wasn't going to play, but I was going to help others. And it's amazing when you do that, how much gratification, even if you're not playing, it came to me. It was a
right.
great lesson to me is if, what was it saying I used to tell to my basketball players? I always said this, you guys know who Mickey Mantle is? And of course, some of them don't anymore, but of course, you and I do. One of the greatest baseball players of all time. I said, you know what, Mickey Mantle, all those great Yankees on the outside, they had plaques and they asked him, what would you like on your plaque to remember you by? And he said, I wanted one thing, and that was that I was a great teammate.
Hmm,
So I learned that at a very young age and also developed some at Kansas State, but I also had great friendships who have really helped me and through the years and great connections. But it also gave me empathy when I coached for the kids who maybe weren't the stars, and I always pulled for those kids. So I just think that it was a great, God has a plan for all of us. And my plan wasn't to play. Now, I did get a tryout with the Houston Oilers because I could really throw the football, and it didn't work out either, really. But so many lessons there that I learned that carried forward for me later. Now, when you're going through those tough times, you don't see it that way.
right.
You do now, of course. And my time at Kansas State was a great experience, and I had great coaches there. It's interesting. One of my quarterback coach ended up going to and this is a great story. We used to do fundamentals at the beginning of practice. One day he took me aside. He said, Donnie, I heard you're a math major. I said, yeah. He said, I heard you want to coach and teach. I go, yeah, that's what I want to do. He goes, you idiot. You're bright, you're smart, you want to coach and teach. I said, Coach, I want to make an impact. And he said, okay, Donnie, I want to ask you a question. He goes, do you want to be liked or do you want to be respected? And of course, I'm 19, 20 years old. The wheels are turning, right? And I said, well, I want to be liked. And he
Hmm,
said, Donnie, when you're a leader, you can't really be liked. You want to be respected. And what I learned was with him is if you treat people and show that you care and that they can trust you, then the respect will come later. And that's what I've tried to do with all my years of coaching. So I'll never forget that. But going back to that coach, he coached at Texas Tech for Patrick Mahomes. And now Patrick plays at Kansas City. My son-in-law works with Patrick Mahomes, throws with him. So it's just a small world. But I just love my time at Kansas State. Some of my best friends, two of my buddies are in my wedding that I played with.
When you were majoring in math, were you, I'll back up a little bit by saying some of my friends who teach in schools do so because all they really want to do is coach. And the path to that is you've got to teach something and then you get to
Mhm.
do what you want. Others love teaching. And to be kind to some kid or some administrator, they'll coach some team. So you can't hedge on this one. Did you graduate knowing that you wanted to become a math teacher or a coach?
I wanted to coach. I wanted to coach. But it's interesting as the years and I had a tremendous, John, I had a tremendous mentor out of Kansas State when I was a JV coach for a tremendous coach and teacher. And the example that he gave me, number one, is he was a terrific math teacher, but he was also a great basketball coach. And it was a great example for me. To me, teaching is teaching. I think your best coaches are great teachers. And I think they can do both. Now, did I come out of college, John, and want to be a coach first? You betcha. But through the years, I still get to go to the classroom and teach kids. And I don't really teach math. I do, it's important.
Yeah.
But I also, the example I try to set for them to set them up later in life, because that's what means the most to me. And I have so many kids that I still have relationships with, players, hundreds of kids that'll email me, Coach, how you doing, how's it going? So the impact that teachers make every day is unbelievable. That's a huge responsibility, and I don't take that lightly by any means. And I always Coach told me this one time, two things I learned from him. Number one was this: no matter how bad the parents are, don't take it out on the kids. And then number two is treat people with kindness and respect.
Yeah.
And those were the two lessons I got from it. It didn't matter if it was a parent, it was an opposing coach, opposing players. He treated everybody with kindness and respect. And I've tried to do that in my career.
You bring up a valid point, man. The parents have changed so profoundly in the 40 years that you've been in education. It used to be if you came home and said, Sister Mary Wilma, slap me, they would have you turn the cheek and they would get you on the other side. I mean, like they had their teachers back, their coaches back, period. And now, man, be very careful what happens in school because it gets home and then the parents come up to school with their kids in tow and say, "What are you doing? Saying this to my child, speaking to my child that way, writing my child off in that regard." So I'm curious, how has coaching changed in the 4 decades that you've been in front of these kids?
Let's first talk about the classroom. And I don't think kids have changed. I think you hit it right on the head. Parents have changed. And the way I see it is this is as parents, we want to guide our kids and show them the way. But what parents do now is they take the rocks out of the path. So these kids have never learned how to handle any adversity. So they've never developed a lot of resilience. I remember I came home one time from basketball practice and got chewed out, deservedly so. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And my mom was cooking. And I remember she said, "Well, how'd practice go?" And I kind of welled up. I said, "Oh, coach got on me, and my dad was eating for some reason. Normally we eat together. And he looked up and he said, "Well, what happened?" And I said, "Well, coach chewed me out." And he looked back up again and he said, "Well, you better start doing what you're supposed to do then." I'm sure your mom and dad were the same way, right?
Of course, things were different back then. How, how how do you think though that prepared you for the following day practice versus your dad getting your back and saying he said what to you? We're, I'll email him right now. Like, so how do you think a child changes based upon the way the parents either clear out those boundaries and boulders in front of them, or choose not to, like your parents did.
Well, they're setting them up to fail later by I think the two things that I think that parents need to understand is that struggle that they're having is part of the education, and also being able to be a self advocate for your learning to go in to see the teacher. And I think many times parents, not all parents, I've got some good parents too. Most of the parents are good. It's just one or two sometimes can be, and I think sometimes too parents have the idea that, when we would say something to our parents, my parents would kind of take it with a grain of salt, because many times as kids you kind of tell them what you want to hear, maybe not all that they need to hear, right? So I love those meetings with parents. I'm a straight shooter, I'm honest, but they have changed. I watch very, very much what I say now. I can't say the same thing that I did 30 years ago. I always tell people I can't believe that size 13 fit in that mouth, because I've made that mistake numerous times. I've learned to watch what I say. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And in coaching, it's changed so much is because many of these kids now, by the time I get them in high school, is they've had maybe how many different coaches, AAU, hitting coaches, shooting coaches, and they really don't trust coaches, to be honest with you. Parents move them around. So I think now is you have to really work on relationships, and you
Right.
have to develop those trust with your players. It used to be you just trusted your coach, right? Well, now I think you have to really work on those relationships, which is so important. And that's the difference I see. I would still love to coach, and I wouldn't change a lot of things, but I would change not what I say, but how I say it.
Okay. Talk about your first season. You were terrifically successful with 3 wins, a few more
Yeah.
losses, and sometimes, like we talked about earlier, sometimes a heavy hand of defeat sets you up longer term for profound success. So, how did that first season as a head coach prepare you to coach maybe even more effectively later on?
Well, as many of us, if anybody that's been in a brand new situation, you don't know what you don't know. So I had a lot of questions after that 3-18 season. I got married that year, and fortunately, my wife thought I was a better husband. She knew I was a better husband. I was a basketball coach, so she stayed with me. But she thought I had, maybe a chance of being pretty good. But what I learned was this: success isn't about winning. It's about developing your players to be the best people they can be. How to be a leader, how to take accountability, responsibility for their actions, and how to want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. How to be a good teammate. So we started focusing on those things. And what ended up happening was the wins started taking care of themselves, because you can develop your players to be really, really skilled and talented basketball players or whatever they're doing, whatever job they're in. But that doesn't mean they're going to work together. They're going to play together. But if you can develop your people to be better people first, how to be a leader, how to take responsibility for your actions, and how to want to be a really good teammate, that will be sustainable success. So the second season we were 6-15. The third season we were 11-10. Then I ended up leaving that school, and 2 or 3 years later they ended up winning a state championship. That culture has changed. And when I took that job, John, it was probably the worst job in Kansas City. No one wanted it. So when I interviewed for it, I went back to my mentor, who was the head coach. I was a JV coach at that time, and I said, Coach, this is a terrible job. And he looked at me and says, Donnie, you're not going to get a good job. You've never been a head coach. So I got humbled. He says, you got to take a bad job and turn it into a good job. And one of the things that happened to me in that time, John, is I've had some really good mentors. One was, have you ever heard of Don Meyer?
Tell me about Don.
Don Meyer was the greatest coach that no one's heard of. And he was at David Lipscomb University. And if you go on YouTube, you can see what happened to him. But he passed in 14. But he was a guy that taught me how to teach the game of basketball. But more importantly, he was huge on developing his players to be better people.
Mm,
And he influenced me. Of course, he is rooted with John Wooden, which is the same mentality. Another coach that had a huge influence on me was Bob Knight. And somebody says, well, God, Bob Knight, how can you be, the inspiration behind Ted Lasso when you got Bob Knight? Bob Knight is a tremendous teacher of the game of basketball. I would go up before the season started, the first year I was a head coach, and watch his practice. He opens his practices to everybody, and they do 6 practices in 3 days. He shows everything they do. And when I was there, I was just in awe how they were teaching the game. So that's how I taught my players. We taught kids motion offense, man-to-man defense. So we're teaching our kids how to play, not how to run plays. We always talk to our kids, we want better players in February, not better plays. So those three people influence, and then there's other coaches that come from those guys that I learned so much from. And I was so blessed to have them at the beginning that influenced my coaching and teaching so much.
You mentioned our job ultimately is to pursue the wins, if you will, by pursuing building up these people into better individuals, not just players, but people. So you have some young kid that you eventually coach up named Jason. Tell us what you remember about that fiery, passionate, humorous kid, Jason Sudeikis.
Well, let me tell you, when he was not on the basketball floor, he was exactly what you see on screen. Very quick-witted, funny, at times a little bit too funny. But when he got on the basketball floor, he got between the lines. He was a terrific competitor and a terrific teammate. That group of kids that I coach at Shawnee Mission West with Jason are still very, very close. And they still text each other. Um, and they'll text me. They'll send me something. Hey, coach, thinking of you. And they'd send it. In fact, I got a picture. I think Jason was with his kids at a, what's it called? Is it Foo Fighters concert or what's it called? Yeah, he was and sent me. He was on stage with his kids, but it was a special group. Jason and every one of those kids were just a joy to coach. And Jason was coachable. He's a good teammate. He worked hard, and people don't realize he was a good basketball player.
Yeah.
He just wasn't real athletic, which kind of hurt him going into college. But he could shoot the ball well, and he passed. And he had really, kids back then, John, I think had better basketball IQ. I think kids now are more athletic, but I don't think they really understand the game because what kids do now is they play so much 5-on-5 at a young age. Where you and I at when we used to play out in the driveway, it was
Yes.
1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and that's how you really learn the game. Now kids are just throwing in 5-on-5, and that's why I think soccer's gotten so much better, so much because they start these kids playing 3-on-3, 4-on-4, and that's why so many kids are gravitating towards soccer more now than any other sport.
When did you first hear about Ted Lasso?
It's been about 3.5 years ago. I'm walking down the hall to my classroom, and a colleague sees me and says, "Hey, there's the famous basketball coach who inspired Jason Sudeikis' new show, Ted Lasso." And I didn't know anything about it, John. I'm sure I had a dumbfounded look on my face, and so I hurried up, got in my classroom, and got on the computer and found the show. And then I went home that night and started watching it, and my wife and I fell in love with it, and my wife points up and the screen and says, "Yeah, Donnie, that's you." And I really did. I really didn't see it, but I did see many of the lessons.
To our listeners and viewers who haven't yet heard of the show or viewed the show, just in your own words, tell us what Ted Lasso is about. Why is it so lovable and so popular?
You've got a guy that's hired to coach a soccer team by the owner who wants it to fail because her husband, they're getting a divorce or they're already divorced. So the soccer team is her ex-husband's love. But so to get back at him, she's going to do everything she can to make sure that this soccer team fails. So she hires Ted Lasso, who is an imaginary football coach from Wichita State University, to come and coach that team, even though he knows absolutely nothing about soccer. And what he does by the way he coaches and the way he inspires people is at the beginning, the owner is trying to undermine him, but she realizes the change is made because it's kind of hard to go against somebody who's constantly praising you and so positive. And his players were the same way. At the beginning, they thought he was really quirky and stupid, but then they realized the little things and little sayings he had, like the belief sign, they all had a meaning to them. There's so many lessons in there that people love. But the thing that I love the most that he does, and it's really coaching, is he coaches every personality different. You can't coach the same way every player because they're all unique. Just like you have, what, 4 kids? Is that right?
That's right.
Or I have 3 daughters. I I love them all equally, but I don't treat them the same. They're unique. And
Right.
it's no different than a basketball team. I heard this the other day, I thought was so good. That's what I love about coaching. I love taking a group of kids and with different personalities and talents and molding them into a team. And I love that. And the challenges that come with it, man, I miss that. I miss that. And Jason's group, that was an easy group to coach because they were family. They played together since they were in 3rd grade. Now that's gone. Kids are moving and going everywhere. There's not that community, if you will, like there
Right.
used to be. But as far as the show, going back to it again, he was set up to fail, but because of his kindness and he treated everybody with respect, he won everybody over. And the lessons that he taught with each player, he treated them all differently, unique, but he pushed the right buttons. But the show, there's so many life lessons in it that as a coach or a teacher, I think everyone that's in a leadership, any type of leadership position should watch it.
Give me a story from your life that you wish Ted Lasso would put into his, meaning a practice, a conversation, a moment inside the room or outside that you shared with one of your players, the entire team that you recognize, man, this is the kind of stuff we should be celebrating on international television.
Well, that one, I love the story about the goldfish. I love the story about, what the happiest animal on earth is a goldfish. You know why? It's got a 10-second memory. And there's so many lessons there for all of us. We all make mistakes. Doers make mistakes. They just do. Now, I told my kids this, how do you handle a mistake? You recognize it, you admit it, you learn from it, you forget it, you be a goldfish. So there were so many kids that I've coached through the years that they would make one mistake and then there would be 4 others. I would teach them that it's okay to make a mistake as long as you're going full out, but just don't try to you turn the ball over, get your fanny back on defense, you
Mm.
know, and those lessons are same way in life. We're all going to make mistakes. Learn from them and try not to make them again. And I had a young player one time. I screwed up, I admit. He did something and he's a great kid. And I got on him pretty good in the locker room. And I felt bad. I went home and I texted him. I said, "Hey, I want to take you out to lunch tomorrow." So I met with him and I said, "Hey, I want to apologize what I said. You've been awesome all year long. You're coachable. You're a good teammate. You're all the things that we want in our players." And before I got done, he says, "No, coach, you were right. I screwed up." That's a leader. He's holding himself accountable. Those what I miss is those little teachable moments. He was actually getting it. I could go through 100 of those of kids that they Jason was not only hearing, but he was listening.
Mm. Off the court, what's been the proudest moment for you as a coach? So we could talk about trophies and cutting down nets and titles and second place finishes and a whole lot of huge things you've done. Congratulations on all of them. But ultimately, recognizing you're pouring into people. When you look at your work in that regard, what's been the highlight from a 4 decade long journey?
My family. I love my daughters. They're all great kids. Well, they're not kids anymore. My oldest daughter is a registered nurse. My middle daughter is a leasing agent. My younger daughter is a human resources working on recruiting and she's doing well. And they've married really good guys who are good people. And I've got 4 grandkids now. And then I've got a wife who, is the love of my life. She's my best friend, and to coach, you have to have a spouse that really is willing to sacrifice so much for what you do. Because I wasn't there much when I was coaching. I never missed any of my kids' activities, but she held down the fort. And she also had a different perspective. She would tell me sometimes, I remember this, she'd say, Donnie, sometimes kids need love the most when they deserve it the least.
Mm,
And so I just am very proud of my family and my grandkids. I hope that's my legacy. It's great to be known for being part of the impetus behind the show. It's, the coaching honors. That's awesome. Those are great. But, to be honest with you, I hope I made an impact in people's lives that they'll remember that, coach helped me,
yeah.
and or my family as well, that, I had a really good dad who, the greatest gift you can give your kids is to love their mother. And my kids know that about me.
Amen. People sometimes view arrogance and confidence as certainty and belief in self, when the reality is that oftentimes is the exact opposite. The most pompous kid in the classroom is frequently the one who feels most poorly about themselves. How do you, as a coach and as a math teacher, and now as a dad, and now as a grandparent, and as a human being, when you recognize that it's the belief that's missing, help that person in front of you see something beautiful in themselves? How do you do that, coach? And then what's your idea on how we can do that for those that we're called to love in our lives?
I think it's very important first to develop relationships with those kids because they're acting the way they do for a certain reason. So I think you got to know a little bit about them. But arrogance is a lack of confidence. And deep down inside, they're really not confident what they're doing. So when I'm really more so with a player, because in math, a lot of times you have kids that maybe are not as motivated. You got to work with them, and you have to have little successes with them. And then you have some kids like you're talking about that they're arrogant, that you got to work with them as well as far as understanding that, okay, you've got this gift, but you can do so much better as well. And that what are you giving back? Like my players, I'd always tell this, I would much rather have a person that makes a team great than a great player. And to me, somebody that's arrogant, you will be humbled. It'll happen to all of us. And the kid in the classroom, I don't have a lot of those because I don't teach the upper level classes. I have kids that are really good students and some that really work hard, which is how math was a struggle for me. I had to work hard at it. And I think it paid off for me later. But I think with arrogant players and kids, that there's a reason why they're that way, and you got to figure out numerous reasons. But I always just at times say, are you doing your best? Can you do better? I mean,
Yeah.
don't compare yourself to others as well, too. I mean, kids now compare themselves to, I'm sure your kids compare themselves to their siblings at times, right? As mine did. But to me, I've had so many different kids through the years to work with, but I think you got to get to know them and how they tick and then figure out a way to motivate them. And if somebody is arrogant, like I've had players that, a lot of times we're getting kids, basketball players that they do a lot of stuff in the summer, they play a lot of games, but they're really not fundamentally sound. And they've been told they're the best thing since sliced bread. And I always talk to them about, okay, what can you do to get better? How can you get better? Don't
Yeah.
compare yourself to that person. You're better than that person, but you want to be this level here, then you're going to have to work a lot harder. So I had these kids and they were the best players, but they were the hardest workers. And I think sometimes when you have a kid that's arrogant, if you can bring that kid in and watch how the really, really good ones work. I used to take my kids until they outlawed it to practices at KU and watch KU practice with Bill Self, and Roy Williams was there at that time, and watch how Paul Pierce practiced and say, hey, he's pretty good, isn't he? Right? Do you have that level of work ethic compared to him? So I think kids need to understand teaching kids to be a good teammate is so important because that's a loss today. I've been blessed. I've had really good players, and I was a really smart coach when I had good players, not as smart when I didn't have as good players. But I was lucky enough, my best players were always my hardest workers.
Coach, we've been talking a lot about your players, the classroom, or Ted Lasso, or Jason, or your wife, or your girls, or a lot of other folks. Make it personal for a moment, though, so we get ready to wrap up this practice and get ready for the game. For those who right now are listening to this conversation and they're hearing about your story and they're listening to the journey you've been on over the last 40 years of success. It's not been perfect. It's not a straight line, but add it all up, and it's been a wild, joyful ride for you, successful one. And yet they haven't found that yet for themselves. They went off in your case to K-State and they did not get the starting gig. Not only that, but they didn't get the opportunity to coach and teach math afterwards and find the players and develop the champions and find the spouse and develop those three girls and the grandbabies. These are people who are maybe struggling right now in their lives with belief in themselves. What encouragement would you offer them?
What a great question. My faith first. I think you have to have faith and you have to believe in yourself. I think you need to find something that you're really passionate about. That I love teaching and coaching. If you have something in your life that you're really passionate about, you're going to work for it, but it's not going to be easy. And there's going to be times that if you'll just keep sticking with it, you're so close to success. Don't give up. Those setbacks, they're going to set you up for success. I truly believe that. And I know there's people out there that at times when it gets the hardest is when you're growing the most and you're just so close to being successful. Just stick with it and keep believing in yourself. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. And always know that you yourself, I really believe this, can do so much more than you ever think you can do.
All right.
And don't be scared to take a chance. Me, I got up in front of in St. Louis, one of the first, I spoke in front of 800 people the first time, scared to death. Fortunately, I had some people who believed in me. And the people that are out there that want to be inspired to keep doing what you're doing, have a passion, and know the most important commodity is you. Don't ever forget that.
Coach, if you can be in front of a classroom teaching math, you can be in front of any auditorium, any stadium, anywhere, man. So
Mhm.
you've already done the hardest work. It's downhill from here. We have 7 questions that we tether all of our guests to. It's called the
Okay.
Live Inspired seven quick fire questions. So here we go, man. Question number one, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh, wow. I love that. The Carpenter by John Gordon.
He's been on our podcast, a dear friend of mine. What's one positive characteristic or one trait you possessed as a little boy growing up in a small Kansas town that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Always has a smile on my face. Sometimes people say, Coach, you don't have a smile on your face. I'm positive, but I always had a smile on my face. Always was really, really, really happy.
If your home caught fire, your wife, your dogs, your th daughters, your grandchildren, everybody's out, and you have an opportunity of running safely in and grabbing one item, what's that one thing you come racing back outside with?
Oh, wow. It would be probably the Bible that I have in front of, we have a little pedestal where I watch TV and that's what I'd have. I'd probably get that because it's motivates me every day.
If you could sit on a bench and have a long conversation with anyone, living or deceased, who would you like to have seated next to you?
I've always wanted it to be Abraham Lincoln. I thought he was such a tremendous leader and he was such a great leader at the most toughest time of our country.
Someone once told me you can be liked or respected. Maybe you can't be both at the same time. I think Lincoln represented that pretty well, Coach.
You betcha, he did. Yeah.
What's the best advice Lincoln, your parents, some great coach gave you? So the best advice you've ever received is,
Don't take yourself too serious.
what is that from The Art of the Possibility? Rule number 7. So here we go. Speaking of rule number 7, it has been said on question number 7 that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. Coach, how would you like your one sentence to read?
Lucky, lucky. I'd say that I'm just everything I'm doing, I'm just very, very lucky and blessed to be doing, and lucky and blessed to have the family I have, lucky and blessed to be able to teach and coach kids, and lucky and blessed that I have friends. I mean, I'm very, very lucky and very blessed. And every morning I pray for courage and wisdom. I know that's two words, but I think they go hand in hand.
Coach Donnie Campbell, state champion, college football player, got a cup of coffee in the NFL, married, daughters, grandbabies, accolades, cable television even came knocking, speaker, all these job titles. And yet, when you look at the end of the end, it says lucky and blessed. So, Coach, I want to thank you for being lucky and blessed and for sharing that gift with those of us who look up to you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and I wish everybody happiness, and don't ever forget to keep believing.
My friends, that is Ted Lasso. I mean, Donnie Campbell. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Lucky and blessed. Live inspired.